Here, today we're gonna do a presentation on the Kafka Connect, and we're gonna write our own Kafka connector, a source connector. So let's quickly just browse through what is there, and then we just go to our coding and share the code and run the connector. So very briefly, we have a Kafka source connector, right? So and the Kafka source connectors have, we will define the source partitions. So the Kafka needs to understand when the Kafka connector reboots, okay, or boots or crashes and starts again, where I am. So it needs to basically have a tracking information. Okay, I was at fourth record or fifth record, right? So it needs to have a partition and the offset to track that. If so that is the source partition. Okay, let's quickly go to this little architecture diagram so that it's understood here. So this is a Kafka Connect. So what happens is Kafka Connect has all the connectors. It's a different service on the Kafka. It has all the connectors to do that. So you see the Kafka cluster is right over here. So I have a database. If they have a database JDBC, there is a JDBC source connector. So the data will flow from JDB source connector, and as you know, that is going to push to the Kafka, right? This is the same way you could push using the producer, right? And once it is available in the topic, consumer can basically read the record, subscribe and read it. So you have the thing now. You can have consumer. Instead of the consumer, you can always parallelly have a basically a sync. So sync is going to get that, it automatically says, okay, you know, at this partition offset there is a record, and is going to basically do it and then push it to your destination. So that is a connector. So we have different kind of connectors. We have a JDBC connector here, we have a syslog connector, MQT source connectors, and all these are all open source connectors. So similarly, we have HDFC sync HBS connectors. So we're gonna basically write. So many times you will find that your connectors, what are available, they don't serve your business needs, right? You would be configuring and they don't and they need. So we're gonna basically have our own source connector to be ready to that. Okay. So what is our connector is gonna look like? So we will have a source system, okay, and we have a Kafka Connect source system and right to connect a Kafka Connect, okay. And the once it is written to Kafka, anybody, any consumer, any sync connector can push to the target. Our portion is only on this. So we have a source connector here, and we are using any source system. It could be database, it could be an API, it could be another thing. So we're gonna have a defects systems. Defect systems, all defects are available to that. So our source connector will read from the defects, which is a source system, and push to the Kafka. All right. So that's what it's going to do. So let's quickly go out here, and as we do, so I'm going to basically do the look at the code and share it. So let's quickly. So before I go out here, I want to launch my connect. So let's launch my connector so that we conserve the time. Docker image. So I'm gonna start it, and as it starts, you see that I am starting my Docker image, and the Docker image is starting my Kafka, right? And it's gonna running the Zookeeper, and then you have a Kafka server, and then you have the registry, and you know, the Kafka Connect. So let's quickly go to the code meantime. And I'm gonna go out here, okay. So understand the code part of it. So we have the Kafka Connect, this SV defect connectors. So we have a when you create, this is the connector that you can use. You can just use a plugin POM file and do that. I'm using the Maven part of this. This is my Maven file. I've defined my dependencies here and the manifest here, right? So I have my dependencies defined, which is a Kafka Connect API, which I'm using the thing, and SL4J. Okay, you can use SL4J as a bridge. You can use logging with the common loggings or with the log4j or anything, right? And it's a good thing that one should basically use SL4J, because in organizations sometimes they de-appreciate log4j. Even code is running, you will not be able to push the code push the code in the CI. So you have to use SL4J and jump to the other loggings. You know, so let's quickly, this topic is more about the Kafka Connect. Let's go there. So what is the, so we have our connector here, and I have a defects version system here. So I'm going to say, hey, this is my defect versions and get the implementation out here. So I need to define first of all in a config my config connector properties. So I'm going to not basically share these config properties, a little passwords and all things. So config properties you can define, as know the task and other things thing into that. And for a standalone, you can define your this standalone properties, which is basically key converter, standalone key converter, REST API port, and which everybody you can know that. Let's quickly go into the other portion of it. So let's quickly go on to this one. And so we have now SV defect source connector. So this is a source connector. There's a logger here and there's a version start and these maps. So whenever you define the source connector, we need to define what is version. You need to define the start. I have a source connector here, and then I have a task configs and the stops. Nothing code is there. We go to the schemas. We define our schema. Any source system Avro thing, we have a schema which is defined for our source system for the defect systems. And we want to go to configure. This is the config file for the configure, and then we have a source task. This is the important file. So by default, we extend our file source task. In the source task, we are reading the version, and there is a version class to return the version. Then we are starting with the defect connectors, and then we have this polling to this one, and array list thing ports, and then we have a source record, see, which is generating the source record, and then I'm getting a timestamp issue. Okay, and next page. So I call the REST API. I'm using a REST API here to pull the data from the defect systems. All right, I'm using one of the repos to pull the defects. All right, and so it is straightforward. So what is important in this one is a generate source record. So we have a generate source record. When I do a generate source record, I need to specify source partition and the offsets. So this, remember in the slides we talked about the source partition and source offset, right? And I am going to get the topic information and what is my record key and the record value, okay, and the updated time to the millisecond. So this generates a source record important, and the source record is generated, and then I'm polling. I have a I'm using a Git client, app client, and I am calling the next issues to get the issues list. I'm using issue from JSON, and then I'm creating a source record from this generate source record, remember, and then add the records. Once the source record is updated, I also update the stamp, because to understand the track information, I need to basically go and say, okay, from this source system, hey, it's a pagination. All right, so I'm implementing the pagination. So I'm going to say, okay, I have like 20 records already pulled. If the 20 records are not pulled, then I'm going to call this this guy, this guy. Otherwise, if my records are there, I'm going to increment to the next page, right? Or otherwise, I will just update my last times and with the source records. Okay, and I'm using a Git Hatch app client. It's a one open source client, and I'm just calling this one with a client with this API. I'm just calling the version to basically fetch the thing, and there is a. These are the particular models. So this is a JSON model, and there's nothing thing. I can just show one of the things. For example, if there's an assignee system here, so it's a Pojo class, all right, and you define the Pojo class with getters and setters. So by default, everybody knows that once you define a REST with the JDBC, you need to have the models with the Pojo, right? Springs model. So that's what exactly, and this is a REST client which we are using into that. Important is a validator. So let's go to the validator. So we have a time validator here and the message. So there is a class. When you implement this config.validator class, you have to define ensure valid. It will give you name and the value map value. You find in this case I am having a timestamp value. So I will see that, hey, is this timestamp, is it really a timestamp or it's some string or something, and throw an exception. That's how it is, right? And similarly for size, you can implement any validators based on a schema. I have a timestamp, so I'm using this timestamp validator into the class. Okay, so let's quickly so this is how our system works. And then I'm gonna go out here there is an HTTP client here. If you look at this, so the client is implementing this issues with the. So if I have a successful record, I'm going to take JSON response and get body array, and you can call construct the URL. So basically what happens is I'm using the one of the defects repos here and to pulling this one and constructing the URL. So you can use any HTTP client. I'm using one of these HTTP clients open source I showed in the POM, and to do that. And this is so more important is now the packaging portion that we want to focus on the connectors frameworks. The connector framework says, hey, you define a source connector. Okay, you define a connector config, and you create a config and mention properties files which are just identical to the connector. Whenever you create a connector, source connector, you will find the properties that we have to define. And this one, worker properties are only needed if you are checking in the standalone. If you're using the distributed mode, this connector properties will take care of it, right? And SV defects version. Okay, so we have this little stuff out here. So let's go out here on the defect version, and you can just build this. This is a plain jar file. You can just maven clean pom. For the purpose of thing, I have already built it, and I started the connector, and let's go out here and see the our jar files. Okay, so I have a Docker here. You see, I have a folder here, connectors, in which I am basically putting my defect connector.jar file. Okay, out here we can go and see into this one, and also we have a Kafka, which is an OPT folder. Okay, so I'm using the Landup image, and there is a Kafka here. You can use anything, and there's a connector folder set. You can see connectors folders here. So connectors folders basically will have the three third-party connectors. You can see all the third-party connector here. Okay, and our customer connector. So now we're gonna basically go to the Landup image API. So let's connect it so that we can see out here. Let's go out here, connectors. So this is my local. So if you look at the my localhost 3030 system, right, when I started, it's a defect issue, the topics. In the topics, it's loading this all the defects values, it has put it onto that. Okay, so I'm gonna refresh this one and say, hey, localhost 3030. Okay, and now since we restarted right now, so we have a Kafka Connect UI, and the topics are 8. So we entered out here, right, and we can see, let me go create a new one. Okay, and as I go out here, I'm gonna little wait a minute, I'm gonna show this trust file, and there is a file here in the config file. Okay, let's go out here and worker properties, and you connect this one. Now I'm gonna go to here, and we have our, you see our defects connectors here. This is our defect connectors. Okay, so we're gonna have the defect connectors here, and we're gonna say, hey, and create, and come out here as it's creating, right? So we're gonna say the connector topology. So this connector SVD connectors is running out here, right? You see the states of this connector. So this connector is running, right, and the topics is out here. We already see the topics here. So let's go to the topics here, and in the topics here I have a topics for the defects issue AI. And you see, hey, I have a systems reading from the defects from the repo, and this is our schema for that. There is a URL here, and there's a created and timestamp, right? Okay, so we have all the key and records varying on here. You can see the raw data also for the defect systems, all right? So there are PR requests, and then for you can put any repos here. I have the defect issues for the topic it's coming, and this was defect was created, defect is closed, and this is a defect, and there's a PR raised, right? And partition is 0, offset is 5. So let's go back to our file here, and we're gonna basically, let's quickly go out here and file in the system, right? And so we have now our source connector, which is SV defect connect source connector, which is out here. It is pulling from a using the REST API. It is pulling from the one of the source systems and pushing to the Kafka Connect. All right. So if you look at this Kafka Connect, the Kafka Connect has basically different sources. You can have push the different sources. I have worked on Elasticsearch also. So, but it would complicate thing because if I try to sync my data to the Elasticsearch. So that's why in this video, we are in this video session we are doing, we can do, I will show you another, and I can write the connect Kafka Connect sync connector, which is very similar to the source connector out here in the framework, and identically, and then push it to this one, create a connection URL, this one. So typically this Kafka Connect, what we did was we used one of the REST clients and we used it to connect our make the REST client connection, and then we use our source system, which is one of these existing REST APIs, pulled the records, massaged it, and then our connector basically pushed it to the Kafka, right? And I Dockerized it so that I can do it. You can run the local Kafka. I have the system running on a local Kafka connector also, but on the Docker it's fast, and then we connect it. Guys, happy coding. Thanks. Have a great day. Uh, you know, and thanks for connecting. So we just connected in SV defect source connector. There's a source connector and sync connector. They share common architecture, but have differences in configuration, and happy coding. Bye.